it's Jennifer from heysealemon. Those of you following me on my Instagram know by now that I am a big fan of the show Outlander, so I'm really excited to share that this video is sponsored by Outlander Season 3. I've teamed up with Sony Pictures Home Entertainment to promote the release of Outlander Season 3, which is now available on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. There's a link in the video description below where you can find the limited collector's edition of Outlander Season 3, which includes deleted and extended scenes and a ton of content exclusives for the major Outlander fans out there. If you're new to Outlander, I will also include some links down below where you can find specials on Season 1 and 2, and I want to note to my younger viewers out there that it is a show with mature adult content, but if you are of the age, I think it's a really great series. It's adapted by the Outlander books by Diana Gabaldon, and it's like sci-fi meets history meets romance, which I am a big fan of. To celebrate the release of Outlander Season 3, I will show you how I made this book inspired by Jamie's print shop from 1765 in Edinburgh, Scotland. This episode from this season is one of my favorites. He's printing books in his print shop using a printing press from the 1700s. There's authentic tools in the print shop, and you guys know I get really nerdy about bookbinding, so I love this scene. This is also the moment in the series where Claire travels back in time to finally reunite with Jamie after 20 years, and he gets to see pictures of his daughter for the first time from the future. I made this book with that scene in mind, so it could look like a book from Jamie's shop in the 1700s, but it's bound in more of a traveler's notebook style because Claire is basically a time traveler, so I thought that made perfect sense. And I was inspired by Claire's family photos, so this could also be used as a mini photo album, and I will include links to all of the supplies I used in the video description below. And here is how I made this Outlander-inspired traveler's journal. First, I'm going to make my own tartan pattern for the covers of 2 of the booklets. This is optional, but I thought it would look nice to have the tartan of Jamie's clan in this book. So I taped down a piece of cardstock and painted my own tartan or plaid pattern, and I do have a tutorial which I did the same process for. You can check that out here, and I will also link it down below. I made this with watered down acrylic paint and looked at a photo of Jamie's tartan for reference, and it's not exactly like his clan's pattern, but it's pretty close. While I let this dry, I'm going to make the inside pages of the booklets. To make a total of 3 booklets, I'm going to use 18 sheets of letter-size paper in 70-pound weight, but you can use any weight you prefer. I'm going to fold each sheet in half on the long side, and when all of the sheets are folded in half, I'm going to then cut them in half. You can do this with a paper trimmer or a craft blade. Now that the pages are all cut to size, I'm going to stack them together to make the booklets. You just want to stack one folded sheet on top of the other, and I put 12 folded sheets per booklet for all 3. Now my painted cover is dry, I'm going to cut it to the size to make the covers for 2 of the booklets. To measure the size, I just traced one of the booklets, tracing what will be the back cover and then holding it in place while I flip it to trace what will be the front cover. Now trim out that cover and use that center line you made as a guide to line up the pages with the cover. Now we're going to make the holes for binding, and to hold the booklet together I'm using 2 binder clips. Put down the binder clip arms, and I'm going to use those as the measurements for the binding holes. I think this is a really easy method, but the space between the binding holes is really up to you, and you can make the holes with a thumbtack or an awl. So I made one hole near the binder clip and one hole at the end of it on each side. Now single thread an embroidery needle with craft thread, and make sure the binder clip arms are up at this point because you don't want to bind them in your book. And now we're going to bind the pages together using a saddle stitch method. I do have an in-depth tutorial on this method on my channel, but I will also show you how to do it in this video. Start from the inside, leaving a little tail of thread on the inside, and then on the outside, return the needle back into the inside, so you're basically weaving the needle back and forth through the binding holes. When you reach the last hole, you can then return the needle back through all the binding holes until you reach the other side. Then when you reach the end with that little tail of thread you left, you're going to tie the thread in a knot. Trim off any excess, and then you can also tuck the ends of the thread in the middle where the binding is to keep them neat and tidy. Remove the binder clips, and now you can fold your booklet in half. Press down on the spine and you now have a booklet. If the cover and the pages not lining up on the end bugs you, you can trim that to make all of the pages and cover flush. You can do this with a craft blade and a roller and a cutting mat, and just trim off about 1/8 of an inch, and the key to having a smooth edge is to do it slow and steady. I repeated that process with the remaining 2 booklets, and since the painted sheet only makes 2 covers, I give the other booklet a red cardstock cover. You can go without covers if you prefer and have all of the pages the same paper, but I really do like how these turned out. And now we can move on to the cover. I'm using a piece of faux leather, which is vinyl fabric, and it has the leather texture on the outside and on the inside. You can also make the cover out of a different type of fabric if you prefer. To measure the size of the cover, I'm using all 3 booklets as a template. So tracing what will be the back cover, holding them in place to estimate the width of the spine, and flipping them over to trace what will be the front cover. I then added 1/8 of an inch around that size to add a hang to the book, which means the cover will overlap the pages just a little. So for your reference, here is the size I made my cover. Trim that out, and then next I'm going to make a small piece for the closure on the cover. I rounded the edges by cutting around a pen cap, and here is the size of that closure piece. And poke holes about 1/4 of an inch from each side on that piece. You can then lightly erase any pencil marks from the cover and fold it in half to find the spine, because next we're going to make the binding holes. Here's how I marked mine. I did 1/2 inch from the ends, and then 1 inch inward, and then 1 mark for the middle of the spine. Then pierce through the marks to make the holes, and make them large enough for the elastic cord you're using. I'm going with a thin elastic cord, starting with about 30 inches to work with. The binding process on the cover is just like my previous Traveler's Notebook tutorial, which you can check out right here and in the description. Start by pulling the elastic cord through the center, and on the outside you can loop through the closure piece. This will hold the cord in place and prevent any marks on the edge of your cover. Now return the end of the cord back through the center, and you want to make a loop that's large enough to fit over the book. So you can test this out by folding the cover in half and placing it over to estimate how much slack you need to give it. About this much is good for this book, and now to the inside of the cover, you're going to put the ends of the cord through the remaining binding holes. Starting with the bottom, return that cord through the next hole, and then do the same thing on the top. Now to the outside of the cover, this part is optional. If you have a bead or a charm you want to weave through, you can go ahead and add it here. In Outlander, one has to have gemstones to travel safely through time. So let's say if Claire needed to time travel with this book, these gemstones would come in handy. I placed one of these on each end and returned the cord back through to the inside. Now to tie it off, place one of the booklets open in the center of the cover, and tie the ends of the cord over it in a knot. And trim off any excess. Now the center cord is complete, and I'm going to move on to the book corners. These are also optional and just decorative, but they do add a nice touch to this book. For these ones I found it helpful to add just a touch of glue on the inside, otherwise they kind of slipped off. Then I used needle nose pliers to securely clamp them onto the corners. Now let's complete the binding for the booklets. Place one through the cord you already made, and add an extra piece of cord around the spine of that booklet. So make a loop of cord around the booklet and then tie a knot on the end. And cut off any excess cord. Now that cord can be used to hold the other 2 booklets. So place one through the loop in the back of the book, and place the other one through the loop in the front. And this is the type of binding that you usually find in a traveler style notebook. You can take the booklets out when you're done with them and put new ones in, and that way you can continue to use the same cover. I wanted to add one final thing to this book, which is inspired by Jamie's print shop, and I wanted to put the print shop sign on the cover. You can definitely leave this book as is, or if you want to try it, here we go. I printed a design similar to the sign in the show on a piece of vellum paper, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can download and print out this template. On the back of the template, I covered it in pencil, and this is going to help me trace it onto the cover. So it's going to act as graphite paper, and when I go over the lines on the top, a pencil line will be left on the cover. I cut out the design and taped it to the cover so it's easier to trace. Now tracing the design with a pencil and pressing firmly so that the pencil on the other side goes onto the cover. Remove the template and now you have the final art to trace. You can use a metallic pen or a permanent marker to go over it. I'm using a brown glazed pen, which sort of makes it look like the design was printed with a clear varnish. And it dries with a hard, glossy consistency, and I think it looks awesome on this book. And for adding some of my family photos to the inside pages, I used black adhesive photo corners along with a date stamp. I hope you Outlander fans enjoyed this video, and if you're excited for season 4 like I am, hit that like button. And again, I will put all of the supplies I used in the description below, as well as links to the Outlander series. Feel free to adjust the sizes and the materials I used in this book to make your own unique book, and if you do, I would love to see pictures of your projects, so share those with me on my social links. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that little bell icon so you know when I post new videos. If you want to jump into another book project inspired by a show, I will put some right here. Those links will be down below, and I have a lot of book projects on my channel, so go head on over there and check them out. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!